What's going on, everybody? It's Frito here for your Overwatch. The experimental card went through to live. Wasn't entirely sure if they were going to. All of the changes bar one, which will be added later, did go through. We're going to review what the changes were, discuss what it's going to impact in the metagame, and then review if this is the right direction for Overwatch to be going. Rapid fire, since we've covered these before. Baptiste, less damage but better DPS with a faster fire rate on his primary fire. You're really going to be able to melt people with this one now, and his secondary fire shoots a bit slower but heals 10 more in an AoE, making his shots more impactful. Mei's cryo freeze will now restore ammo, similar to how Reaper's Wraith form works, increasing your uptime while in a brawl, and Ice Wall loses a second off its cooldown. Next up are the 4 characters that got their health changed. Way bigger deal than I feel people are making it out to be. We'll get into that. But McCree, 25 extra health, perhaps not fat McCree, but maybe like dad bod McCree is what we got now. And his reload time has been reduced. Pretty sizable buff, but the hit scan roll has stiff competition. However, especially with some of the other changes, McCree might have more of a fighting chance. Brigitte has 25 extra base health, which means her base health will be 225 total, much like many of these other characters. Symmetra gets the same treatment, but 25 extra base shields, which is important because those regenerate, meaning that she can stick her face out to spam her ranged orbs more freely, at least against certain things. Some random spam just won't be able to kill her where it used to, and as well, she'll be rewarded more when she ducks away from a brawl after getting a bit focused, maybe retaining some of her charge, reloading her ammo and health, with self-regen, then going back in, more powerful than before. Sim already had good maps, now even better. And Widowmaker's health goes down to a severely glass 175. All right, first up, want to talk about the biggest winner in the patch, I think, Baptiste, which is easier for me to say because he was such a non-competitive support option, in my opinion, in the prior version, also due to the way the meta shaped up. We can't be certain what meta we're going into with these changes, but the previous one had sort of a mix between more of a rush playstyle or more of a split play for angles and deathmatch style, neither of which Bap is particularly good in. But now with Bap's buffs, the comp he plays well in, bunker or double shield variants that want to hold their ground, got quite a sizable buff. Now you'll notice the amplification matrix buff is not shown in the patch notes and won't be in live. For now, what they're doing is working on the visual effects of it, and it will be coming soon after. So the 1080p Baptiste window, as many Overwatch fans have been calling it, won't be in this patch for a little bit until they clean it up visually. But even with just the 2 buffs he did receive, I think you're going to feel a ton more impact from the support position as Baptiste, particularly when you add in the fact that his best combination is probably playing alongside a Zenyatta, where this extra DPS that he gets from his primary fire with a Discord orb makes Bap plus Zen an incredible backline DPS duo. The shields on your front line of double shield won't be as strong, but the firepower of this comp went up a lot more than you might think. Also, don't underrate the burst heal as well as the AoE heal on the secondary fire of the biotic launcher. For one, when the enemy is targeting a single character trying to burst them down, you may have preferred the faster fire rate if you ever missed, but overall I think you would prefer a bigger burst of healing slower, seeing as it'll more quickly combat the enemy's focus fire. As a target starts to get low, giving them 10 extra health might mean they're invincible. We saw this similar thing happen when Mercy got 10 extra healing, where a lot of characters that she could all of a sudden pocket, going from 50 to 60, and now I believe it's 55 in between the two, but you see my point. That's a very special magical healing number, and it's in an AoE, which means characters that normally would carve up a bunker composition, like Winston cleaving into it, well, now your healing full-on counters his cleave damage, which is going to charge you up to your ultimate. Granted, hasn't been buffed yet, but getting an incredibly fast ultimate was one of the reasons why Bap got nerfed way back when they toned down his regenerative burst ability, but now this secondary fire adds a little bit of that back. It's going to take quite a bit of ranked testing to figure out where Bap and the bunker playstyle lands, but I think I can safely say these buffs are significant enough to take him out of the basement of my tier list. Who knows how high he'll eventually go. What I can safely say is the mechanical output at your disposal now will start to invade on other characters that we're seeing decent use, like Mercy and Lucio, that have a lower skill ceiling healing and are kind of competing for this support position. So that's the big winner. I'm going to bounce through the next few that I think are kind of neither here nor there. This Mei change will be annoying for tank players who used to be able to crowd Mei when in crowd freeze because she's usually got low ammo at that point. Now, with a burst of health and the freeze ray locked and loaded, tanks will have to still back off and respect that position. So Mei in the tank brawl is going to take up a bit more space than before, but there's better, more consistent rushdown type characters right now. And if anything, the rest of the changes means that I think the core of the game might move away from that playstyle. Though Mei already was pretty good on a few different maps, at least sections of them, this will intensify her abilities on those. Symmetra is in a similar boat where she is incredibly good on her best maps and then incredibly gimmicky on others. This prompts a lot of players to want to say, well, why can't we have Symmetra be good on more maps? Well, the problem you're going to find is that lower ranked players struggle more against Sim because it's a bit of a game sense check on how you have to engage into the turrets and respect the space she's occupying, whereas higher ranked players don't struggle with that as much. So this, similar to how when they buffed Reaper repeatedly back in the day, is the type of change that I don't think really makes too much of a difference at higher tiers, but may be quite a nightmare for you at lower ones, especially if you don't have enough coordination to get everybody to go the right direction, or you have a teammate that's just consistently feeding into her defenses. The extra health means that some hero picks you might pick now may surprisingly lose the battle 1v1 when you expected to win it, which makes countering Sim more of a teamwork effort. Next change to Brig. As a Grandmaster Brig abuser, I'm more than happy for Brig to come back in the metagame for my SR, but I stress that simply buffing her health stat is kind of missing the point on where Brig is falling short, and it might not be a great idea for the health of the game to just return Brig to her former glory, but the truth is, when Brig got reworked, she went from being a brawl character who enabled goats, this incredibly forgiving rushdown playstyle, but then into 222 Brig, I think the community never really adapted to what Brig actually was in that new form, which is a dive mirror character. Because she had more powerful ranged healing, similar to like Zenyatta or Ana, that she could deploy from safety, whereas like Mercy has to go in, put herself at risk in order to do the same thing, as well as crowd control to keep the enemy dive off you and help sculpt your own staging for a dive, and an ultimate that interacts really well up against a lot of other dive characters. You start to see where I'm coming from. She's a dive mirror character. So in those instances where you're running dive, which doesn't really protect the backline much, and they're running dive, which attacks the backline, Brig has been proven to be strong, fortifying your backline to do a lot of the same job that similar characters like Lucio or Mercy would want to do. Giving you a kill combo, which can dual DPS, really adds a lot of space to your team. The truth is, nobody in ranked plays that. And don't be fooled, that is a high-level tactic. On the old version of Brig, even in her quote-unquote weakened state, she was already been used in the Contenders Grand Finals in Korea, though it's debatable if she was as strong as the Mercy pick, but the point is, she's in the conversation and was viable enough to be considered in those dive mirrors. In the Overwatch League Grand Finals, it was more sniper heavy. In that case, the answer is obvious. Mercy is superior for that, but if you and the enemy are running divers, not snipers, Brig enables and disables to fight in that matchup. So, long explanation, my point being, the stats increases aren't the reason why she is or isn't getting picked or isn't good. I think a lot of players still play her as if she has the frontline stats to contest every tank, including like Reinhardt, and don't play her in the way that I'm prescribing you need to. The potential ramifications of this health buff on Brig would mean that she may return as one of the fortifying forces to prop up Double Shield. Back in the day when 222 came out and Double Shield was rising in prominence, high-level support players were able to fortify any weakness that the Double Shield tank combination could prop up with Baptiste, and the only exploit really being your Zen. So if the enemy would try to pick the counter comp against you to either dive or rush it over, Bap Brig would be used in order to make you undiveable or rushable and give you that tanking presence that is otherwise lacking from the Double Shield tanks, allowing them to leverage their firepower advantage, because you have these other characters that are kind of breaking the game in a way to fortify your position with Lamp or cheat in sort of a pseudo tank with Brig, creating these super synergies, let's say, or maybe whip out the PC word at some point. But you see where I'm going with this and why this could be a problem if you don't want to see an unbeatable double barrier comp return. It is the previous patch which I, Seagull, just about everybody I know praised for being the most diverse patch ever. The reason why it was so diverse is because it was hard to create these super synergy comps that stacked effects on top of each other that made you immune to enough things to make a long list of things unplayable. So more things were playable, but for whatever reason, Blizzard is trying to return into the fray these abilities and characters that cause these exact problems. The truth is, I don't think this change for Brig necessarily at the moment scares me more than the BAP changes, because I don't think you find yourself in those matchups where she's required to do the job that I described. Because of the skill ceiling or poke advantage output that other characters provide, you often still don't need Brig, and picking her is a bit of a liability because you have to play somewhat aggressive in order to activate Inspire, and if the enemy isn't playing aggressive into you, which frankly in ranked most times they're not, it's another reason why it's a bit of a mistake to try to buff Brig into a playstyle that just doesn't exist. But anyway, most of ranked gameplay is very standoffish and poke heavy or rush down. So for ranked, this might not change much, but I think it could at higher levels of play. So this will have like the opposite effect that I said the sim change would. Last up, the 2 hit scan character changes. Very dominant role in Overwatch. McCree's base health goes up and reloads more quickly. This means that he is way more lethal up against rush down tanks especially, and may start to compete with Ashe in terms of frontline pressure damage. Because of Ashe's scoped rifle shots and lots of ammunition, she could really lay down a lot of hurt, but now McCree reloads pretty darn quick and has a little extra health in order to take riskier angles. So the combination of both of those things means that he can step a toe in deeper than he used to, meaning he may start to fight back in the ranged hit scan square between him, Soldier, Ashe, and Widow. Keep in mind, Flashbang is just an amazing ability, so there's gonna be a lot of cases where, especially when a fight gets scrappy, that Flashbang cooldown's coming back, and if McCree has more health than you, he may live long enough to get it off again, fan the hammer, and have a quick reload to melt a thing or two. So especially in a more brawly playstyle rather than a poke pick-off one, I think McCree is gonna start to see his value, where Ashe's stats beforehand were maybe too good to pass up, and you just played around her weaknesses. But I think this is a win for McCree, especially with where the meta looks like it's going. I'll be interested to how this interacts with characters that could outplay him before fairly reliably. Reaper and Tracer could outskill him by dodging his flashbang and kind of farming his big hitbox. The health and reload buff may help him in those really tight duels where every second counts. Last up, Widowmaker. This one is challenging for me to review because I went back and forth on who I thought this change would hurt more. So the truth is, she makes all the plays she used to make, except for when she's pressured out. What I mean is, if Widow gets an angle and is uncontested, she can still hit a bunch of shots and carry the team fight. Shielding in the game is weaker unless we get to a meta that overloads on them, but let's hope not. Part of the reason why a lot of players at a lot of skill tiers, actually, I think high level were the most vocal, but Widow felt like a very safe and powerful pick at a lot of tiers, partially because a lot of characters that you would think could rush her down, because her mobility has such an incredible power, if she doesn't misuse grapple, she can get away and get a few extra shots off before you can fully close the distance and finish her. Well, having a little bit less health to start means that a bunch of characters that would have previously needed to only shoo Widow away at best now will confirm that kill if the enemy supports or off tanks don't come to her aid, which this makes me think that at lower tiers, Widow will be much more punishing because the awareness to turn around and help someone on an off angle simply isn't there. So because of that, you can play Hunt the Widow on just about any character that has the mobility to do so from any position. Winston, Wrecking Ball, Diva, Lucio, Genji, Tracer, Sombra, Reaper, whatever. Her health is so low that catching her out means that you don't even have to aim perfectly to kill her. It feels way easier to me. A lot of these characters aren't incredibly precision based anyway, so once you get on her, I think she's gonna fall over. Now, the question is, at the highest tier of play, do we finally see Widow drop out? And I'm thinking, well, one, it may matter what the rest of the meta is, because if there's just shields in the way and you have to play for shield break, well, then either way, regardless of the health change, she's sort of just out of contention just based on that. But the awareness of healers and tanks to peel is much better when dives come in on Widow. However, the aim of these rushdown type players is also better. So I'm not so sure. With a lower overall ceiling breakpoint to reach, will a GM Genji burst Widow through a pocket just because her max health is so much lower? Another thing to consider as well is in the ult fight, that little bit of extra health does matter. She'll die instantly to Nanoblade. A lot of tank ults will easily beat her, which you wouldn't say. Widow has an incredibly strong ult fight anyway, but my point is when she gets hits by any decent ability in the game, it's going to be hard to save her no matter what you do. So that makes me think there's a chance that Widow falls out entirely, but we'll have to see what the tank meta is in order to truly know that. And I have kind of buried my opinion in between on these different sections, but ultimately I'm not a huge fan of these changes. I think they're just a flat out mistake. And the good news is Team 4 has proven that they can go back on changes. So it's no big deal to just be like, yeah, that patch, let's just revert that one. But I'm really at a loss why they would look at the most well-received meta of all time and then decidedly try to buff and nerf a bunch of different things at once. The positive look of that is that, to be real, we do have to get live testing on these types of things to know what it is anyway. And with adverse changes before, like when Hog or Genji or Symmetra or whoever was overbuffed to the max, they did rein them in. So as we start to see problems, we can expect Blizzard to make new solutions. The problem is what I was kind of saying earlier about a lot of these character picks are by nature exclusionary to the meta because they create team comps that have too many bells and whistles attached, too many immunity or safety effects compounded on top of each other, that it's possible to create team comps with no weakness, which is the core foundation of why anti-power creepers were trying to get Blizzard to get rid of it to begin with. These characters and playstyles that are adjacent to them, not just them themselves, but the compounding effects of combining different things together, don't promote movement, positioning, or FPS outplay. Instead, they promote, I have a button, that means I can't die, which is why I don't want to see them go down this road. I think these changes are subtle enough that we may still find ways to counteract some of these more obnoxious comps that kind of can suffocate the skill out of the game, but I just don't see a reason to go down this route. I would much rather see the team adjust maps more to try to make better maps for these characters that they want to see have a reason to play. Like, for example, one of Symmetra's best maps in the game, Horizon, isn't in the competitive pool. Now, we can argue whether it should be or not, but that is a map where Symmetra, Baptiste, and Orisa all have great positions to play. I like to work from a balanced game first, where the combos and abilities aren't too strong, and then try to find maps for them to succeed on, rather than push the stats up so that they work on maps they shouldn't. This doesn't seem like a controversial thing to me. It seems like common sense. And anything beyond that, well, then we can start getting into hero restrictions and how you pick and all that other stuff. But let's not go through the last 2 years for the next 2 years. Let's not go backwards, okay? We finally got out of the swamp. I just made the video that said Overwatch is in the best state it's ever been. Don't make me have to reverse the thumbnail with the down red arrow next week when you change 5 more things that cause more problems. Please, Jeff, I'm begging you, please say that this is just testing in order to get ready for Overwatch 2 in the next few months. I'd love for that to be the case. And for my sanity, I'm going to assume that these aren't intended as a long-term philosophical turn away from the things we wanted towards other things, instead as a way to test changes into the live game that are going to benefit Overwatch 2. To keep my mental strong, I'm going to force myself to believe this is the case. And if you want to help out my sanity and keep me making these videos through the thick and thin, leave this video with a like to show your support. Say Happy Halloween in the comment section down below, and don't forget to hit subscribe and the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos go live. You can get notifications sent directly to your cell phone, so click the bell today and don't miss out. We've got some massive scale guide videos that I've been working on putting tons of TLC into that'll be coming out soon. And now I'll get back to working on them. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. We'll see you guys next time.